Welcome to CEO Insights. I'm Marilyn de Guzman with Investing News Network. My guest this episode is David Regan, CEO of Sona Nanotech, based in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And we're talking about new breakthroughs in nanotechnology and its application in the medical field. Hello, David.
Hi, Marilyn. Thanks for having me today.
Yes, good to have you. Let's start our conversation just with an overview of Sona Nanotech and your company's value proposition.
Sure. So Sona Nanotech has proprietary technology for the manufacture of a particular type of nanoparticle, and it's one that is uniquely biocompatible. And that's really important because increasingly we're seeing nanotechnology applications in the medical field. And so when one starts thinking about the possibility of nanomaterials being injected in the body, biocompatibility is paramount.
Right. So can we just have maybe just a little bit of a conversation about nanotechnology and what makes it an interesting area of research in the medical field?
Sure. So, nanotechnology, very interesting area. A lot of developments in that area over the last 20 years, a ton of research that's got into it. But fundamentally, what it's about, of course, is manipulating materials at the near atomic scale. And when you take materials down to that small size, the properties can change in important ways, and they can be utilized for different functions in different ways that provide a lot of novelty and a lot of utility. So, for instance, the whole idea that these particles that are so small that they can be fused to molecules, cells, various drugs, etc., and be used as a carrier for those molecules, and then can therefore be activated from external signals in the body, opens up some pretty exciting, sophisticated medical applications that we're going to see in the future, that are the things of science fiction that we've seen in the past. And we all know that this is where medicine is eventually going to go, where it's much more precise. And that's what we're trying to enable with our targeted hyperthermia therapy.
Right. And you've alluded to the term biocompatibility earlier. So for our viewers who are not familiar with that term, why is that important for your research and for your technology?
Sure. So many people make nanoparticles, and they're being used by researchers all around the world and commercial enterprises as well for industrial applications, medical applications. We make one particular type. We make several, but we make one in particular, a gold nanorod. Now, in order to manufacture a gold nanorod, you do it using chemistry, given its small scale. But it's taking a nanoparticle and elongating it. Now, others who have to go through that process use a toxic substance to do that, which is fine if you're using the materials ultimately for some industrial application. But if you want to use them to put them in the body for nanomedical applications, it's just not going to work. It's, arguably too dangerous to be doing that when it's a known toxin. You don't want to be injecting that into the body. Our patented in one country and pending in others proprietary technology allows us to elongate those nanoparticles into nanorods without the use of those toxins. Now, why elongate them? What's the purpose of that? By doing an elongation of the gold nanoparticle, you get an aspect ratio, so width versus length, that allows one to tune it to an external signal, such as a near-infrared light device that is tuned to the same wavelength. That allows us to signal those nanoparticles once they're implanted in for instance, a cancerous tumor, which is the intention of our therapy.
Right. So let's talk about that therapy, the THT technology you're developing. Can you talk a bit more about that? What therapies targeted for, and sort of where it's at right now?
So sure. And by background for that, obviously, we're all familiar with the three core technologies that are used currently in fighting cancer in terms of chemo, radiation, immunotherapies, and you could also add surgery to that. Each one of those things have side effects. There's collateral damage. So, where we hope to be moving as an industry is towards doing less damage and doing more good at the same time. Our therapy is called targeted hyperthermia therapy. And that's exactly what it is targeted to achieve, and what the data we have and the studies we have shows that it will do. Now, how it works specifically is that these gold nanorods are injected into the tumor, either intravenously or directly into the tumor. Once they're in the tumor, with the application of a near-infrared light source close to them, that near-infrared light passes harmlessly as non-thermal energy, radiation, through the healthy tissue without doing damage. But when it hits the gold nanorods convert the radiation to heat, therefore heating the tumor from the inside out. Heat kills cancer. Now, the other thing that's interesting about cancer cells is that they're more susceptible to heat than regular cells. So if, as we aim to do, are able to hold the heat at 44 degrees Celsius, think about a human's body temperature is 37, 36, 37, but take it up to 30 to 44, you're still not doing real damage, assuming it's not done for a terribly long period of time, to the healthy cells. But at 44 degrees, you can kill cancer cells. You don't start killing the healthy cells until above 50. So the idea here is we heat a tumor from the inside out, and we're killing the cancer cells selectively, a real precision treatment that we think can be really useful, particularly when there are comorbidities in a given patient, the elderly, for instance, where you may not want to undertake a surgery with a resection. Some of the particular colorectal cancers we're focusing on, really have poor outcomes because it's very often that the patient is faced with a resection, taking out a section of the colon or the rectum entirely for the rest of their lives, and being forced to live with a colostomy bag. That's an area where we think our therapy could have a big impact on quality of life.
Right, that's interesting. And as you said, you're currently focused on colorectal cancer. Is there any particular reason why you're focusing on this type of cancer right now?
Sure. Two specific reasons. One, this type of therapy we believe will work in the types of tumors that tend to be in colorectal, where those tumors have what we call a leaky vascular system. There's an EPR effect, that enhanced permutation retention effect, that results in the gold nanorods aggregating in those tumors on a 7-to-1 ratio relative to in healthy tissue. So you really get a good, strong concentration of the tumors. That's number one. Number two is, of course, we're looking at where can we achieve the biggest impact on quality of life. And right now, for rectal cancer in particular, way too often the outcome is a complete resection. And I tell the story of and doing work with a colorectal oncological surgeon here, that he passed on the story of having a 40-year-old come in and him having to let him know that, look, we've got to do a complete resection, and that's it. There are no other options for you. And this 40-year-old could not believe that to be the case. Colorectal cancer, by the way, is becoming more prevalent. It's also becoming more prevalent at younger ages. So it's an important area to really focus in on. We think this therapy could work in other cancers, but this is where we'd see the beachhead, and where we could gain momentum in our initial applications would be in that area.
And that could be a good segue to your recent press release about a new clinical trial or a new study of your therapy that will look at other cancers in addition to colorectal. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Sure. It's a preclinical study, and we're very fortunate to be working with an eminent researcher, surgical oncologist, Dr. Carmen Giacomantonio, who's done a great deal of work in the immunotherapy world in terms of his research. When we got together, we like to say that it was a little bit of worlds colliding. Our world of nanotechnology, his research world of immunotherapy, And it's when those worlds collide that oftentimes innovation can occur, because you can see things from a different perspective. What we found is that our targeted hyperthermia therapy could meld really ideally with particular immunotherapies to enhance them and really create a synergy where you're getting a 1-2 punch that provides a much more powerful treatment for cancer treatment.
Right. So you've done a pretty good job explaining, to our viewers, nanotechnology as its application in the medical field and, the therapies that you're developing. Why should an investor now be interested in, nanotechnology? And in particular, why should they invest in your company?
Well, I mean, this is obviously cutting edge stuff, and this is innovation is where growth happens, and we are. I'm happy to say very much on the cutting edge, but not on the bleeding edge. There's been a ton of research, as I mentioned, that have gone into both the use of the manipulation of nanoparticles and a great deal of work, obviously, on immunotherapies for cancer patients. With that data and that background and the number of peer-reviewed journal studies that have been done by researchers all around the world, we're really standing on their shoulders and standing on the shoulders of that research to say, look, this is incredible information. How can we now bring it together and operationalize it for a therapy that will do good, that will really, create an enhancement over what is currently done? I was shocked, frankly, when we first started looking into this, that given how much knowledge there is in this space, that no one has yet been able to commercialize this. And no one, we discovered, had the right elements. We're bringing together, we believe, those right elements. We have the gold nanorods that are biocompatible. That's a really key element of it. We're developing this near-infrared light device that I talked about, which will be used to activate the gold nanorods. When we look at the challenges we have in front of us, a lot of it is not so much the science. The science is proven out in journals by many researchers around the world, but they're operational things. What does the dosage look like? What does the time period for the therapy look like? How do you get the light source into where the tumor is? How long do you keep it there, et cetera? It's these factors. Lots of variables, but we've got some promising data now, and this is an exciting area, particularly with this new study that we've announced, and the idea that there'll be, we hope to have initial results in within 3 months on that.
Right. I'm interested to get your thoughts on, you've alluded to some of the challenges, for all its potential to change the face of medicine, right? Nanotechnology. What do you see are some of the challenges or gaps that could be preventing the technology from reaching its full potential, and how are those being addressed?
Sure. Well, the regulators are the arbiters of what is considered safe and what isn't, and in order to convince them, you have to have a mountain of data to support it and show it. Now, the good news is that in the U.S., in particular, the FDA, they released their nanotechnology guidelines and viewpoints in 2017. This is something they're very much ahead of, because they knew this is an area that shows great promise for enhancing human life and longevity. In fact, they went so far as to co-found an entity called the Nanotechnology Characterization Laboratory. They co-founded that with the National Cancer Institute in the U.S., and we've been very fortunate to be working with that entity, who have been vetting our materials, and we've had a couple of announcements on the results they've come back with, because the key factor here is safety. We need to understand where is the bioaccumulation once these absolutely tiny near atomic size particles are implanted in the body. What does the clearance look like? From what we understand so far, the clearance has a half-life in the body of between an hour and 24 hours. Really good clearance, frankly. The body flushes it through, and of course, because our nanorods are made with gold, they are, it's an inert material, and we think can serve ourselves very well. There are also questions of reactivity. What can it react with? You've got to study this in many ways to understand the full profile. We've got great studies in small animals. We've got some more coming up, as we've announced. The next stage would go to larger animals, likely swine, to be able to prove it out in something closer to human before applying for a so-called IDE, investigational device exemption from the FDA that would lead, which would lead to clinical trials at that point.
Right. Really interesting to learn about this technology, and I guess any new innovation that that will ultimately solve some of our biggest healthcare and medical challenges is really welcome development. Thanks for joining and sharing your insights today, David.
Marilyn, thank you very much for the time. Happy to talk. Cheers.
Thanks everyone for watching. Join us again next time for another engaging conversation on CEO Insights. And if you like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss new updates and interviews from Investing News Network.